Spurs have made a couple of key integral internal appointments, with Scott Munn now starting his role as CEO and Johan Lange as technical director, along with confirmation that Fabio Paratigi, for those Spurs fans, is still cooking. He is in the background and remains working for the football club on what we understand to be a consultancy basis. So really keen to know from you, if you can tell us, if you know, Ben, what that dynamic looks like behind the scenes when it comes to the planning of recruitment, because I feel there's a general vibe around the fan base that I think in the summer overall, I'd say 75, 80%, everyone was fairly happy with the recruitment. I mean, what do you feel at the moment is happening behind the scenes at Tottenham? Is it all sunshine and roses as we are coming to this January window?
Well, I think all recruitment teams are never sunshine and roses, but it's about a dynamic, and you need a freedom to challenge. So the more you bring in, the more of a healthy debate you want. There's no point in just having yes men and women. And Paratici has obviously historically been very important to Spurs. Udogie was one of the names that he masterminded. So therefore, you have to give him credit because that's paying off. And Tottenham always had very high hopes for Udogie as well. So it's great to see him shining at the moment. But Paratici's been through a difficult time with the ban. And now the consultancy, as I understand it, is more ad hoc. So I don't think we can see Paratici as leading so much as picking up the slack where there is overlap and continuity. And I say where, because it is a big transition from Conte to Postecoglou. But nonetheless, you're working 2-3 windows ahead, and there will be certain targets and bits of business where Paratici's not only opinion, but work previously is relevant to the conversation. And when you're talking to players and agents and clubs, you need that continuity. They don't want to feel like every single conversation is with a different person. And I think Chelsea found this when Todd Boehly was sporting director. Then he stepped back. Then now there's two co-sporting directors in Paul Winstanley and Lawrence Stewart doing a really good job of being the face in the market. But there's also Joe Shields. There's Behrad Eghbali, who's very powerful. And then in addition to that, you've still got the manager who will talk to players as well. So the Paratici role has almost been split because he was kind of doing everything in many ways and working with Levy. And we've heard this for a while, but supposedly Levy's stepping back a little bit more and delegating. I think Spurs fans might be dubious about that, but nonetheless, that's the kind of official line. And then Paratici's role has been split, and effectively Scott Munn is doing half of it. Johan Lange, as you say, has come in as technical director. And I still think this recruitment team will build and develop over time. And in the short term, it means that Postecoglou's probably got a little bit more say, because he's come in so early to the formative stages of a recruitment team and model being built. And he's implementing such a distinct philosophy that, of course, his opinion holds more weight, perhaps, than it would have done had he been an older Spurs appointment under a slightly more stable model with some of the names that have now gone. The chief scout, remember, left, and then Gabbiadini was sacked and then came back. So that's another little twist to all of this as well. So you've got a new/old chief scout. You've got a ad hoc/old person in Paratici in ad hoc consultancy, and then everyone else is kind of new. And it's still kind of unclear how hands-on in this window someone like Daniel Levy will be. So add all of that up, and it does seem a little bit fragmented. But what I would say is that Munn has made a very strong impression. And because his start date was delayed, he's had a lot of time to get the lay of the land and start developing relationships. So Paratici, I don't think, is running the show, pulling the strings. I think they're going to him when knowledge is needed and when consultancy is a key component, because maybe he's got the relationships due to pre-existing plans within Spurs, or just within certain regions where he has a lot of say and sway and can be very useful. But I still feel like it's the other names that I've mentioned that are starting to move forwards, and Postecoglou has got a fair amount of say in all of this, which is why, and I'm sure we'll come on to it, when Spurs are looking for a centre-back, Postecoglou's perspective is, let's not let it drag on. Let's not go for one primary target, put all of our eggs in that basket, and then find that in the case of Jean-Claire Debo, they're not going to sell. And then you've wasted your window. And then the other players that you were thinking of maybe feel like they've been second choices. So Postecoglou's perspective in all of this, as you probably see from press conferences as well, is to be very concise, very clear cut, and make a definitive decision. Of course, the rest of the recruitment team need to agree, and some of them might even outrank or outvote him, but his input will be clear and concise. Get it done quickly, be very concise about it, and move on if we think a target's a lost cause. And that's ultimately why, in the context of centre-backs, Dragusin has become this priority, because they obviously feel like they can get that done in the next few days.
Before we do dive into the business that we could be doing in a little bit more detail, I want to ask you quickly, Ben, about the business that we have already done. And I think it's testament to the work that Fabio Paratici has put in. When you look at the jubilance in the Spurs fan base with the 2 contract extensions that have gotten over the line. We saw Pat Matter-Sarr in the last couple of days. It was confirmed that he signed a new deal at the club until 2030, following Destiny Udogie, who signed a deal of the same length. Brilliant deals for Tottenham. And again, 2 players identified and brought in by Paratici. It's brilliant to see the work that he's done actually reaping the rewards for us. Looking at what might happen, Heung-min Son, Giovanni Lo Celso, Rodrigo Bentancur and Yves Bissouma, to name a few, are a couple of players who have only got a couple of years left on their contract. Do you know if Tottenham will be looking to extend any of those contracts?
Yeah, I don't think I'm allowed to say the A word on this show, but another club that happens to be in London went through a sort of flux of contract renewals, and it wouldn't surprise me if Spurs do something relatively similar. I don't think all of the names, from what I'm told, that you've mentioned will be in line for 2024 contracts. Bentancur still has some time on the deal, actually. I think that one is 2026, and I'm not aware of anything starting at this stage with Lo Celso. But I think of the names you mentioned, I would single out Sarr, who we know has already signed, Bissouma and Son. And I think that Bissouma and Son will be next in line as priorities, if you like. The beauty of these kind of renewals is if you feel like the player wants to stay, you can work on them concurrently. Son's going to be a really interesting one, because there's lots of interest, particularly from Saudi Arabia. Son dismissed those links last summer, and I think that now he's captain, Spurs fans will feel very calm that not only does he love the club, but he wants to lead the club. So any speculation won't really be of concern. And I would imagine that that will be a relatively simple contract in terms of convincing Son to stay and back the project. But by the same token, there's still finances. There's things like age to consider. There's other players coming in. And it is always just a little bit nervy if somebody like Saudi Arabia comes along, because they can just offer a lot of money. And then you might have to not equal that, but counter that to some kind of degree. And this is why Kylian Mbappe spoke very superficially to Saudi and fueled the interest before immediately dismissing it, because you can use it to your advantage. Marco Silva did the same. He signed a new Fulham deal, but prior to that, he spoke very seriously and strongly actually considered a move to Saudi Arabia. And again, he did it because it's part of your decision-making process, but it's leverage as well. Now, all of these Saudi targets, some of them, they have low confidence on. But Son has been on a list of about 20 names for 2024 in Saudi Arabia. And one of the reasons why it was so dismissed by Son is because there was no approach, there was no desire from Saudi to get him in 2023. They didn't think that was possible. So the Son links had emerged because of the fact that he's on this list of 20 for 2024. And now we can kind of compare 2023 to 2024, and we can say how many of the 20 in 2023 did Saudi get from the elite names, the likes of Messi, Neymar, Salah, etc. How many did they get? And it's about 6 or 7, because Ronaldo had already joined. They got Benzema, they got Kante, they got Neymar, they got Sadio Mane, and so on. They got about 7 of the 20. And they knew that 10 of the 20 were maybe less realistic. So Son's on the list, but I think he's on the side of the list that's a bit less realistic. So I think a new deal will be offered to Son. And there's no reason, if things go as they are at the moment, with Son scoring goals and enjoying his football, and actually, ironically, having a bit more freedom, you could argue, with Kane going, that he wouldn't extend. And the other one is Bissouma. I would expect him to be offered a pay rise and a new deal in 2024 as well. So I'm not dismissing the other names and saying that they'll be left out, but I think that you take the contract renewals in phases. And from what I'm told, Bissouma and Son will be the first 2 from the list of names that you put to me that are due new deals and or better terms.